Take it away. All right. Hi, everybody. Rick Anthony, Board of Directors of Zero Waste USA. This is the panel that's Plenary that's dear to my heart. It's community organizing. We spent a lot of time organizing Zero Waste San Diego, and we actually have a zero waste plan and a mandatory ordinance, and it's amazing what you can do. So we're going to talk a little bit about organics. We're going to talk about recycling. We're going to talk about plastic. And our first speaker, I met in Estonia, of all places, where we were planning the Let's Clean Up, Let's Do It program. They're trying to engage a billion people in cleaning up the planet. Turned out he was getting his PhD in zero waste at Riverside. And he's now working for Moore Institute, and he's in Germany doing special studies. So let me introduce our first speaker, Win Calgar.
Thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen here.
Yeah, it's showing. No, it's not. There you go. All right.
All right. Thanks a lot. I'm a research scientist with the Moore Institute for Plastic Pollution Research. We're a small nonprofit in Long Beach, California, focused on plastic pollution research. I'd like to start by acknowledging all of my collaborators and funders, especially the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the Helmholtz Information and Data Science Academy, and the Possibility Lab. So to start off, I'd like to talk about a research project that we recently published on surveying trash on roadsides in the Inland Empire. It's an area in Southern California. And what we did was we surveyed trash nearby neighborhoods, and we did repeat surveys where we would photograph every piece of trash that we saw. We would take a photograph of receipts and different pieces of trash, and we would also pick up that trash whenever we saw it. And we would categorize the material type, the item type, and the brand type of every piece of trash. These are the sites that we went to. Here you can see Riverside. You can see the monitoring sites and the different receipts that we found. And I'd like to give a shout out to Hannah Happage, who is currently a PhD student at UC Riverside. She developed the trash taxonomy, which is a way to take all of the ways that we categorized trash and merge them to all of the other ways that people describe trash. So for example, if some people describe trash as a drink container, we could also merge that to something that said bottle. And this is basically what that looks like. And one thing that we really focused on was brands on trash. And we found that Philip Morris was the most common brand on trash. We could attribute Philip Morris to at least 4% of the trash that we found, anywhere ranging from 2 to 7%. We could also attribute Mars Incorporated, RJ Reynolds, and Jack in the Box to top brands on trash. But I want to draw your attention to the trash that is unbranded, which is 66% of the trash. We have a real problem with actually attributing brands to corporations. Most trash is unbranded. It's difficult to attribute to a corporation. So we'd like to resolve this problem. And then there's also some trash, about 13%, that we can't quite identify to a single manufacturer. So I'm going to change gears here a little bit and talk about microplastics. Microplastics monitoring is coming. We are currently monitoring for microplastics in drinking water, but we are looking forward to the future where we are going to be monitoring microplastics in ocean water, fish tissue, and sediment, most likely. And our group at the Moore Institute is trying to develop open source technology for characterizing microplastics in drinking water. So we have developed this device called the tap trap, which can screw on to a tap faucet, and it will collect any microplastics flowing through the tap water, and then we can analyze those microplastics to quantify how many microplastics are coming through the tap water. And we are increasing access to data. So we are developing a microplastics data portal, which will allow for accredited labs, so labs that have undergone the accreditation process, so they've certified that they know how to analyze microplastics. They will be able to submit data to this microplastics data portal, and that will be integrated into all the other state data portals currently. Microplastics are a very unique pollutant. They're not super similar to other pollutants because they're primarily particles. And this makes them really challenging to manage from a data aspect. So we are going to be creating this microplastics data portal so that we can link microplastics data into CDIN and NZWC and all these other data portals that are commonly used. And what this looks like is we have a microplastics data validator. So you can upload a rules file and a data set to this data validator. And if it is valid, you will be able to submit data to the data portal. If it is not, then you will get some sort of information about what you need to do to clean up the data. Then we are also analyzing or accommodating for new data types, such as photographs of microplastics. This is a unique thing about plastic pollution, that you can photograph the pollution. And Laura Markley has really led the ideas behind this microplastics image explorer. And we have this website where you can explore images of microplastics based on color, morphology, polymer type, size. I think that this portal will really help people to better identify microplastics, because you can just look at, let's say that you see something under a microscope and you know that it's a green particle. You can look at a bunch of other green particles to see if it looks like something that other people have thought was microplastics. So I think this is a real advance for the field. And then we are currently working with several researchers at CSU Long Beach to develop a data analysis portal where you will be able to view the data spatially that we have on microplastics in drinking water. And hopefully soon, within the next year, we will have some sort of model that will predict what your microplastics in your drinking water are, even if we don't have data on that. I want to give a plug to some other resources that you can take a look at. We have our website, moreplasticresearch.org. We also share our code on GitHub, and we share all of our data on Open Science Center for Open Science. We share our manuscripts on ResearchGate, and we're very active on social media. So please reach out to us. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Yeah, we do have about 5 or 6 minutes before the next speaker. I could either move on or take questions. Do we have many questions in the chat at this point?
We have a couple. One of the
Go ahead, Rose.
One of the questions is from Stacy Savage. Will the tap water filter program, hang on, partner with local government water districts to distribute them to residents for testing?
That's a great question. We're currently collaborating with many individuals, including municipalities, universities, concerned citizens, to distribute our tap trap. The blueprints for it are completely open source. You could buy everything you need for this from a hardware store for somewhere around $100. So that was our goal, and yeah.
So in other words, if somebody wants one of these and they don't, who would they contact in order to get one of these?
If you wanted us,
you've said this information is posted and made available.
yeah,
Can you post again where?
yeah,
Where
I will.
they
I
go
will
to
share a
get the
link.
plans? Or if somebody doesn't want to build it, who do they contact for a water filter that's ready, that could be sent to them?
I will share a link in the chat for the blueprints. If
Okay.
you want us to fabricate it, I'll get you in touch with our team that is working on that.
You want to post that information too, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, do we have one more quick question?
There really is not another question for
All right, well,
Wynn.
hold your thoughts. There's more information coming. Thank you, Wynn. Good luck with the Moore Institute, and we're looking forward to branding what we have. Our next speaker is expert in community recycling, actually the 3 R's. If I would say there was a career ladder to do that, I would say you would start at the Ecology Center in Berkeley, and then you would work for Eureka Recycling, which is one of the last community-based recycling programs in the country, and now have your own company called Nothing Left to Waste. I want to introduce Alex Stanovitz. Alex, it's all you. I see you, I think. You need to get off mute, maybe.
Okay, how about
There
that?
you are. I hear you.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. I never worked for the Ecology Center, but Eureka Recycling I was at for about a decade and for a little over a decade. And
Well, you were in Berkeley once or something, right?
yeah, I've been around. And then lately I've been working with Recycle Ann Arbor, and it's just been an incredible privilege to work with these mission-based recyclers over the years. I'm sure many people at this conference can relate that or understand that recycling alone will never get us to zero waste, but when recycling is held accountable to the community, it can really be a powerful tool to address climate change and move towards environmental justice and build resilient local economies. So, I think today I'll just kind of give my perspective from being in the mission-driven recycling, community recycling world for about 25 years. And so, I think everyone knows recycling's kind of in a tough spot right now. 50 years ago, recycling started as a community-based effort with programs designed to protect the value of commodities collected through strategies like source separation, trucks that didn't compact and break glass, in the ability to provide direct feedback to residents at the curb in their bin on what was recyclable and wasn't recyclable. The programs were primarily provided by nonprofits and municipalities who are driven by sustainability goals. But today, things have shifted a little bit. The recycling programs are primarily controlled by waste haulers that are driven by shareholder profits. There's been a proliferation of plastic packaging and a disconnection of what materials collected in the bin and what's actually recyclable. So overall, from my perspective, the shift has really resulted in a drive for high diversion rates, efficiencies, and convenience at the cost of impact. So today I'm going to briefly talk about what makes mission-driven recycling different and how communities can work to make sure that recycling remains an important tool that can provide real benefits to the community while supporting efforts to move up the hierarchy towards reuse and reduction. I think the most important place to start when you're talking about the impact of recycling is defining why you're doing it. Recycling to fight climate change or address environmental justice or build local resiliency through circular supply chains all require the operations of recycling to be aligned with the mission. And so the better you understand your goals, the better you can align the why you recycle with the how you recycle. Because we don't currently realize the external costs of polluting our air and destroying our climate or depleting our resources, the most profitable way to recycle often isn't the most impactful way to recycle. And I've spent many hours over the years working on spreadsheets around zero waste initiatives. And I can tell you that if I wasn't driven by a mission and if I didn't value the environmental and social benefits, it's easy for those spreadsheets to point in a false solution or a different direction. I once heard a revolution was never started with a spreadsheet. But when recycling becomes more than a waste management strategy, when you look at it as a climate change program or a workforce development program or an environmental justice program, the cost benefit analysis changes a lot. And I'm sure, people in this room are familiar, with the fact that zero waste is one of the fastest and most cost-effective ways to address climate change. And that's, so a larger perspective than looking at recycling alone. So not all recyclers are equal. The operational choices a recycler makes impacts the environmental, social, and economic benefits of recycling. Mission-driven recyclers work to balance these benefits. Decisions about what materials to include in the recycling stream and how to collect and sort recyclables considers the impacts it has, on the humans sorting and collecting that material. Well, also, while also trying to ensure that the material is used in a way that results in the highest environmental impact and the greatest benefit to local economies. And of course, cost is always a factor. You have to do this all cost effectively. And so I think the important piece here is that these decisions are considered from the perspective of the community and from the perspective of a zero waste mission, not shareholder profits. And so while a brand has all the reason in the world to push for their packaging to be recycled so that people feel good about continuing to consume it, community may be better served by implementing policies that ban or push for a more sustainable alternative. So a community-based recycler really aligns with the community's policy goals to ensure that recycling isn't competing with reduction. So there are some incredible models of community-based recyclers across the US, including 4 organizations that formed the Alliance of Mission-Based Recyclers, known as AMBER. So the Ecology Center in Berkeley, Recycle Ann Arbor in Michigan, Eureka Recycling in Minneapolis, and EcoCycle in Boulder. These are all nonprofit social enterprises that have pioneered recycling towards zero waste, and they've been delivering incredible value to their communities. I think what makes these 4 unique and this group really important is the fact that they have, that real world understanding of being operators, which provides a critical perspective. They're operators and advocates, and that provides a really important voice and critical perspective to evaluate strategies that work towards systems change. So I encourage everyone to go to the AMBER website. There's some great position papers. There's an amazing video on there. Check it out. But today I'm going to just take a quick minute to provide some examples from Recycle Ann Arbor, where I'm most recently doing a lot of work, working with them. Recycle Ann Arbor is a 40-year-old organization that has history in the community, providing, curbside recycling collection, hard to recycle drop-off facility, a C&D recycling recovery yard. And then most recently, they built a single stream MRF last year. The staff is fully unionized, paying a living wage with full-time predictable hours for all employees. And in an industry that's really reliant on temporary labor, this is really unique. They also work with returning citizens who were recently incarcerated to provide job training and workforce development opportunities. And I think one of the really cool things is, since they're located in a really industrial area, it's kind of a food desert. They actually provide daily lunch to all employees in partnership with a local nonprofit caterer that's really into, farm to table and cool stuff like that. None of these programs in Ann Arbor would exist without the strong support from the community. And that's thanks to decades of work by residents, advocates, nonprofits, that have really educated the community to understand the value of zero waste and recycling as a tool for climate change, and the importance of building resiliency through local circular supply chains. So when the last contract came up for recycling in Ann Arbor, the material had been being transferred to Cleveland, Ohio, as the closest facility that was able to accept the material. RAA came up with a proposal to redevelop a shuttered MRF, and the community showed up big time at city council to demand that the recycling was processed locally with unionized staff, rather than transloading it great distances, to keep those benefits in the community. So they were successful in being able to rebuild that MRF. And then, the community's gone a lot further. Just this month, a few weeks ago, the voters passed a climate village that'll bring in $7 million annually for the next 20 years, specifically to support climate change, with zero waste as a prominent focus of that work. So this type of thinking really changes how the economics of the problems can be addressed when you think about it, beyond just a waste management program. So just a quick note, because I think this is a interesting topic for a lot of people here today, but, RAA chose to develop a single stream facility, and even though it's single stream, their overall residual rate over the last 13 months has been under 12%. So from everything that comes in the facility, less than 12% of it ends up in the trash or going to a landfill. And that's a rate that rivals most two-stream or dual-stream facilities in the country. And this is accomplished by the decisions they make on how to run operations. They've reduced the compaction rates in the trucks. They run the processing lines a little slower. And these are decisions that might not be made if you're trying to maximize profits, but certainly make a huge impact in maximizing the environmental benefits and social benefits. They also monitor and evaluate what's in the trash coming out of the facility, so they can work to address it through education or potentially equipment tweaks, rather than assuming residents can't understand the nuance of what's recyclable. There's a lot of transparency to really get people to understand what should be in the recycling program, and only include materials in the recycling program if they're actually have viable circular end markets that, reduce the need to continue extracting. I think an really important piece of this on the collection side, because RAA also runs the collection fleet, is that single stream allows for automated collection of carts, which is much safer and more ergonomic for the drivers. And recycling drivers in the country is one of the 10 most dangerous jobs, according to OSHA. In terms of recycling end markets, RAA has long-term supply agreements with most end markets. It gives it a lot of stability, and it creates a strong relationship to get feedback on quality. Everything's marketed within 200 miles of the facility. Nothing's exported. PET and HDPE are going to end markets that use those to make new bottles. Glass is going to a beneficiator who sorts it by color to get it, as much of it back as possible to a furnace. And again, this differs from a for-profit waste hauler that might own a landfill and has a very different economic perspective, and a pressure to use that as something low value, like alternative daily landfill cover. And then finally, it's a pretty small facility, about 30,000 tons a year. It's sized to handle the recycling generated in the county. And the long-term goal is to really move up the hierarchy from recycling and build on the significant infrastructure investments in recycling to facilitate reuse. So not every community has a mission-based recycler, but there's still ways to hold accountability and demand transparency. I think the first step, like as we said, is to develop your criteria for success. Determine, this could be through a zero waste planning process, that through community engagement and development of guiding goals and principles, and then really look at the marketplace and see where there's opportunities to connect your operations with your mission, and where there's gaps. And so where there's, you can there's ways to work with any for-profit hauler through RFP processes or contracts, to include things like a revenue share agreement that's tied to market indexes, that can incentivize a MRF to sort to higher quality, labor requirements such as labor peace or living wage ordinance, reporting requirements that increase transparency, or liquidated damages that provide a mechanism to penalize the recycler if they're not actually complying with the contract. I think long-term, a community can do a lot to actually bring in mission-driven businesses, looking at where the gaps are, creating policies. We've heard a bit about that today, that how policies can, create opportunities, like if you ban to-go packaging, disposable or single-use to-go packaging, it can create an opportunity for a refillable business to come into to your community. And finally, I just want to say recycling for zero waste through a community approach isn't about recycling all packaging. It's about moving away from a broken consumption model and changing systems. And to achieve this, we really need policy. And recyclers are a crucial voice in this conversation to design effective programs. So recyclers need to work together with policy advocates to ensure that the goals are aligned and not competing. And there's tried and true ways to do this: legislation, ordinances, fees. But ideally you want policies that promote reuse over recycling, phase out avoidable single-use plastics, ban non-recyclable plastics, and ultimately hold producers responsible for the packaging they put into the world. So at the end of the day, I think the ultimate success for a community-based recycler is a world that's moved beyond recycling and you don't actually need them anymore. But until then, we need to keep recycling, and we need to keep recycling impactful. So thanks.
All right. Well, that's gave you some good information. We got about 2 more minutes. Do we have any questions in the chat?
Yes, we do. Gary, Liz is asking, does mission-based recycling have to be by nonprofits? Could public agencies and private businesses be viewed as mission-based recyclers if they follow the principles you shared today?
Absolutely. And I think a for-profit business can be a mission-based recycler as well. There's a lot of different models now that
Why is here?
To not have to, there's a lot of different models that hold accountability to the community. I think that at the end of the day, the important piece is, having community control, and, certainly municipal operations and people that are really mission driven can encompass a wide variety of structures.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. That was wonderful. Good information, and that and very important. Our next speaker, I won't even tell you how many years I've known her. Almost all her life, I think. She's one of the most competent and intelligent engineers I've ever met. She's built a local community program that has basically impacted the world, and she's a star. And so I'll turn it over to Brenda Platt to talk about organics.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be a gold sponsor of the conference, and I called this Small is Beautiful, not just because I'm under 5 feet tall, but E.F. Schumacher's been quite an inspiration for me and so many others. But so just like Alex talked, I'm here to kind of focus on the kind of composting side of things. And I've been working, for a few decades now on food waste, or wasted food, I should say, food scraps, and looking at communities that have the highest recycling levels before we even began talking about zero waste. Some of these reports beyond 40% and cutting the waste stream in half were in the 80s or 90s. And organics was just critical. But at that time, we weren't kind of looking at issues, and I have a lot of reports, you guys can check some of these out that are connected, but we weren't really talking about issues of local and scale when it came to the non-burn, non-bury landfill solutions, so to speak. We wanted them locally based, but when it came to
Let's see if I
Rick,
can.
you might need to mute. So one of the things that we did, Grace showed this in the last plenary, this US EPA hierarchy of food scrap recovery, and I don't have my pointers working here, but one of the things that if you look at EPA's food waste hierarchy, it has composting after energy recovery and after industrial uses. So in my mind, it's really in need of a serious revamp. And we'd been asking and advocating for a different hierarchy. So I had to create one. I know this has been around for a number of years now, but this is what I'm going to talk about today. Of course, we want source reduction and we want to rescue edible food, and home composting, but source reduction, edible food, home composting. That's bad timing. My son is calling me. Okay. But what I want to talk about right now is small scale decentralized composting. So what is that? That's, what we're talking about is it's kind of like the radical idea that you're going to produce and use the compost within the same community that's generating the food scraps. So we try not to create a numeric number or a mile radius, and there's some principles we've come up with, locally based, closed loop. They're scaled to meet the needs of a self-defined community. You're engaging and educating the community in the food systems thinking, resource stewardship, community sustainability, and things of that nature. This is a graphic we produced to kind of show that, you've got your food waste, you're collecting it. These bicolors, by the way, that's one of the largest growing components of community composting. So it's inherently local when you're collecting it on bikes. But it's going to some small scale system. They're not all looking like this. Some of them are kind of medium scale. It's going into local soils. You're producing food, and then it's going back into the community. It's all kind of circular economy. There's so many benefits to community composting. I'm going to talk about some of them, but I think it's cheaper and quicker than building large scale and industrial facilities. I'm going to talk about engaging and educating the community. Keeps things local. You're supporting farmers, not just rural, but urban. And I think it's really overlooked. So there's a lot more we can do. So I'm just going to kind of visually show you with a lot of photos here. I'm going to try to go through these quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time. But the biggest benefit, I think, to doing local community composting is you're keeping that community asset right within your local community and you're putting it back into local soils. And there's just so many benefits to that. I'm not even talking about soil carbon sequestration or the climate benefits today, but those are many. The community engagement piece, I think, is huge. When you're bringing people together, you're promoting social inclusion, you're promoting empowerment. Composting is a direct way to get people, your whole community, involved in caring for the earth. The neighbors are coming together for a common cause and improving literally the social fabric of their community. So many of these sites that we're working with, these community gardens, urban farms, I mean, it's not just the soil. You see this music and people coming together, they're eating food. There's a lot of local skill building and job readiness. This is a project in Philadelphia that the Community Compost Program did. It's with PowerCore Philadelphia, which is a group that's engaging disconnected young adults as well as returning citizens from incarceration and creating career pathways. There's a link to the video there, but there's a wonderful video about these guys talking about the skills they learned through building these community scaled composting systems. A lot of the operations are operating in underserved, chronically disenfranchised communities. And, when you go into a community and you're saying, let's just, we want you to, let's compost, divert your food scraps. That may not be the winning strategy, but when you're talking about let's now convert abandoned, blighted neighborhoods to green spaces, let's have composting be an accessory activity to growing food in food insecure communities. Let's get, blighted neighborhoods have drug dealers on the corner. When you convert those spaces, now you have places to bring youth. A lot of our members have youth summer camps. So there's just so many connections to these communities and why you could get them involved. This is the Baltimore Compost Collective. Marvin Hayes here has been working with youth all over the city. It's now a site where he can bring, not only is he employing youth, but it's a site where you can bring youth to kind of get hands-on exposure to the wonder of composting and what it can do. I've been working with Eagle Scouts projects. There's a lot of potential to harness the power of volunteerism. This is just one in the Maryland area at a youth learning garden, building a compost bin. This is a site we've been working with in Baltimore. The Hidden Harvest Community Farm is literally a hidden harvest in Baltimore. And one of the things I love about this site is this is the community farm part, but this part over here on the right, they're growing plants that are for use for dyes, indigo and yarrow. And this is there's a warehouse right here, and they're drying the herbs and they're dyeing fabrics locally and creating these skills. In the alley here, there's also this community fridge, so it's a way to rescue food as well as do local food scrap collection that they have open and composting. So there's so much potential. We have been mapping community compost across the country, and it's just growing exponentially. I would say we have new members joining our coalition every week. This map that we have, it's at ilsr.org/composting.map. You can click on it, but if you want to just see where the bike haulers are, you can see. If you want to see urban farms or community gardens or worker-owned cooperatives, they're not all volunteer or nonprofits. We have social enterprises, so that's growing. These are the pink dots here. It's one of the growing sectors. We are just wrapping up our 2022 census, so that'll be available soon. So this is based on previous data, but you can see the growth from 2020 to 2021. This is many of the community composters, but this kind of shows you we have micro haulers, we have urban farms, the worker-owned cooperatives, university and colleges. Show you some more pictures. One of the things that I think is growing is we're seeing huge growth in small sites, and some of them are switching over to a little bit larger, but there's tremendous opportunity to grow, to scale up these small scale sites. And I only put this on to show you how many are really operating with very little square feet, because in a lot of communities you hear, oh, we can't do composting, we don't have a site. Well, community composters don't need a lot of space. So I'm just going to show you some pictures. They're all over the country. Compost Queens is in San Antonio, Texas. They work with local communities and urban farms, woman-owned business. Zero Cooperative in Massachusetts is a worker-owned cooperative that's predominantly owned by Latino and African American individuals that are mostly collecting and taking it to a network of farmers. BK Rott in Bushwick neighborhood of Brooklyn is one of my favorite models. It's a youth-led, justice-oriented, providing jobs for predominantly brown and black youth and young adults. And anyway, it's just we've kind of replicated this somewhat in Baltimore, the Baltimore Compost Collective. There's universities that are doing this, like Princeton on site. This is just kind of to emphasize that composting can be small scale. I included Schmelly's dirt farm, I admit, because of the name. One of the things we have in our network is they have the best names. Peels and Wheels Compost in New Haven, Connecticut is one of our bike haulers, Schmelly's. This is another woman-owned operation in the Hudson Valley in New York and New Jersey, another woman-owned business. Compost Crews in Maryland, where I'm based, and so we do a lot of work with them. And what I love about Compost Crew, they're kind of doing this spoke and hub collection and taking it to a network of farmers, both rural and urban. And one of the sites, this is an urban farm that just opened an expanded system. It's kind of called the Compost Outpost, solar powered blowers. It's hard to see here, but there's two. These are retrofitted shipping containers, and they're retrofitted in Baltimore. This is in the DC metropolitan area, and it's like under $8,000 each to retrofit this system. So these are not very expensive systems to build. This is the hoop house at Eco City Farms. This is the compost outpost. It's very aesthetically pleasing too. There's art. This is the wood chips, but anyway, you can make it look very appealing. The sign, this is actually a pretty big sign, but you know, it's a site now where you can bring people in and educate your community and tell them about composting. We'd need 15 minutes or more just to go through that sign. One of the things I wanted to share is we've started a peer learning community with our network. So we're sharing information and growing the network. We just started it this fall. So this is just an example of some of the things we've been focusing on. And what I want to end here is what's needed in order to grow this sector. So this is, I know it's hard to read here, but I just want to show you, like, this is policies to encourage community composting. That's, people want, the rules, we make the rules and the rules make us. So Alex emphasized that. There's also a lot of this is long-term access to land is important, grant writing, startup funding, fiscal sponsorship. These are all important things. We have next week, just on this policy thing, we have a state permitting pathways for advancing on-farm composting. So check that out. This was the last webinar we did on on-farm composting. We are doing a series of webinars on how local government can support community composting. It's been very exciting to have so many local governments participate. So this is, if you are local government, you can get access to these recordings. There's already 4 there. So many things you can do, small and large and everything in between. So there's no excuse for doing nothing. And I think there's a lot of lessons from single stream recycling that can be adapted to composting. We want high quality materials. We want to make sure that our policies don't privilege dominant corporations or large industrial sites. And I think we have to be wary of depackagers that encourage commingling and more contamination. So, and what you can do, this is probably hard to read, but there's a lot of things that folks can do. We can be supporting reasonable policies and regs. You can be buying finished compost, supporting training programs, providing that long-term access to land, and much more. And I'll just end with one of the webinars we did. Scott Kellogg from the Radix Ecological Sustainability Center in Albany, New York. This was his list of recommendations. And you know, he says, ensure that the needs of the environmental justice communities are made central in drafting your local composting policy. And this point I think is really important. You know, draft MOUs with the community-based organizations when you're partnering, you know, and don't cut them out after you receive the funding. So having this kind of paperwork is important. There's many other things that local government can do, including providing the carbon that's needed to do the composting.
All right.
Back to you, Rick.
Thanks, Brenda. That was really good. I really don't have time for questions. I was told that I have to get us transferred to the next sessions. Brenda, that was great stuff. You know where you can find her, I think. Look in the chat, and I'm going to say goodbye to the panel and thank you very much, and then we'll move over to the concurrent sessions. Thank you very much.